Hello and welcome back to Concept First to Mastery. So we are in our fourth tutorial section, right, for the CSS series that began not quite long ago. So in this particular section, we'll be looking at CSS layout. So as you will see in this particular section that I have here, right, we'll be learning to build this layout after learning some basics about building layouts and all that, right? So it's very important because when it comes to building applications, you cannot take away CSS layouts, right? Every design has a structure to it, design structure to it, and you must learn to actually implement the design structure, design layouts as it ought to be. So we have more on that as we move on from here. Let me just quickly. So we'll be looking at display, right? Property. We'll be looking at how to position, right? With the different positioning methods. Then we'll be looking at float and clear, right? And also managing starting order with Z index. So the understanding of this will actually allow you to build elegant and robust layouts, right? When it comes to building applications. So as a way of introduction, CSS layouts are essential for structuring and positioning elements on the web page. Very, very important, right? So what I want to do now is just take us to, okay, before I get into all this, let me take us to what will be building essentially, right? So this is it, right? You can see that in terms of layout here, we have a 2-column layout, right? One is the main section, right? Which is where we have the screen, the dashboard overview and all that. So, and we also have the sidebar, right? This is just a basic admin dashboard layout. So as we are changing, for instance, now the default screen here is the dashboard overview, right? Which is the only thing we're concentrating on. Then of course, if it's implemented completely, I didn't bother doing that. That's not the focus of this particular section, right? Ordinarily, when I click on settings, right, the screen here should change to settings. Then when I click on analytics, we change to analytics. When I click on user and role, the screen should be changing based on what I have on the sidebar. So we just want to implement this quickly. Then also I have this positioned, right, using position absolute. So we'll learn how to do that. Then we also have this position using position fixed. We also learn how to do that. Then other layouts, right, that are like sub layouts, right? Because if you have now inside this main layout, I also have layouts, right? These mini cards, right? And also the table. So let's get right into it. What I will do first is actually let's have another folder here, right? This is the folder represents the CSS series, and this is the one we did, the mini project we handled in the last section, right? In one of the sections, maybe not necessarily the last. So in this one, we just want to have something that says CMS, okay, let's just say layouts, CMS dashboard. All right, so that will be the folder that represents what we are doing. And again, let me just create a fresh, or let's do it from here, just like we've been doing, cd into this. All right, then I want to open this in the VS Code. So once we have that, now we want to set up our, let's set up the basic index.html, which will be the root file, right, that the browser will be looking to pick as our home page. Index.html. All right, let me zoom this out a bit. Okay. So again, I won't be going deep, right, into HTML because we've done some basic HTML stuff, right? And if you are not yet convenient with that, you can visit my HTML series. So the focus here is the CSS, right? So that allows me to actually generate a basic boilerplate. And like I said, all I want to do now is to just implement the HTML for this page before we start talking about CSS and building the layouts, right? So here, let's just call this learn layout with sample CMS dashboard. All right, so let's just say that's our layout. Then one more thing that I want to also bring in here is the icon library, because if you notice here, I'm actually using libraries, right, icons. So I want to also bring that in. By now, I expect that you should know how to do that already. But if not, let me just go and bring it in for you to see. So here we can just go to npm. Is it npm now? Okay, yeah, cdngs library. Times we have a lot of libraries and you struggle to remember them. So cdngs library, then this should allow me to actually, if you go to library section, I should be able to see font awesome library, right? Font awesome, yeah, this is it. Then I'll just go for I'll copy the link, right? Just copy this link. So this will allow me to actually use font awesome icons. All right, as you will see here. Then the next thing I will want to do is have my CSS folder here. So I'm going to call it main.css. Don't forget, we've talked about the fact that it's good to always use external CSS, right? So let's link to that CSS here. This is going to be link. Then we'll just point to /main.css. So if you don't understand all these things I'm doing, right, like pointing to this, why am I using /? You might want to visit the section 1, right, for the CSS series. I think that's what I need to set up here. Then let's go into the body section where we can, okay, let me just have something here to be sure that this is working as it should. Let me have the CSS just to be sure that CSS is connected, right, before we start writing the HTML. So here I just want to say, okay, let me just write the basic stuffs here. So let's say margin of 0. Again, you should know what this is all about already. So this is like a reset, right? And you know what the asterisk means by now, right? That's the universal selector selecting all elements. Padding of 0. I also want the box sizing. The box sizing, want it to be border. I think I have typo anywhere here. Shouldn't be having this error. Okay, yeah, not padding of 0. And box sizing. So we discussed at length in the last section, right, why you will use border box here. I won't go into that detail. Then here we can target the body element using the element selector now, right? We can just set our font family to be, I want to actually use Roboto, right? And Roboto is not native to the browser library, right? We have some font families that are native. Like if I had to set sans serif, right? Maybe as default here, sans serif. This is available. I don't have to connect to any external library to use it. But if I want to use Roboto, right, font family, I will need to connect to it, right? Let me also do that quickly. Let's go to Google Fonts. Google Fonts, right? Google Fonts. Then we should be able to pick. Okay, while I wait for that. Okay, yeah, it's up now. So let me just click on Roboto straight since it's here. All right, so usually you'll be able to search for fonts here, right? But I think it's part of, after selecting, right, you can search and select. And after selecting, you come here and click on selected family. So I think I have Roboto already. I'm not downloading get embedded code. I think that's what I want. So, and what I want here, you can see is family is Roboto, right? So all you just need to do is copy this one. Okay, no, I want the at import, right? Just copy this. So just copy this and ensure that you have it at the very top of the CSS file, right? That's the reason why I copy the at import. This is used inside the CSS file, right? If you want to place it in the head section of the HTML, you would copy this link, right? And just paste it in the head section of the HTML page. So here now I can now set this to Roboto, right? And it will use Roboto as my font family. Then I want to set, okay, now to test things, just set the background color to ash, 1C, 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 right? And you will also notice that the site we are trying to build, right, is using a dark theme, right? So I will just set that. Then we want the text to be white, right? That's the property for that is color, and we are setting hash F, 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 right? So now to test this, let's just, since I've already connected, don't forget to that CSS. I just want to be sure that the HTML is picking that up already. Let's load that. All right, so you can see now that we have a dark theme already. So that means our main.css is connected, properly connected to this particular page. So we can start doing what we want to do from there, right, in terms of writing the HTML structure. So let's start with the, okay, let's start with the sidebar section, right? Let's start with the sidebar here. So this is the sidebar, right? So let's just start implementing that. Okay, probably what I should also do is just so that we have, okay, maybe when I start applying color, I will do that. I wanted us to be seeing what I'm doing straight away. Windows left. Then let's have this page. All right, to be Windows to the right. Windows right. All right. So let me shift this to the side. All right. So the first thing we want to set is the dashboard, like I said. So the dashboard, I will just make the dashboard a section. I'll just say this screen is dashboard, right? And then we can have the dashboard. Let's just use div here. We can also use section if we want to, but let's use div. So, and this will wrap the entire dashboard. Let's have a class of dashboard, right? Then inside this dashboard, we have two things, right? We want the sidebar and the, now we are building the layouts now. And part of when you start, of course, it's from the HTML, you start building the layout. So you need to structure the HTML to perfectly fit the layout you want. In our own case, we want a 2-column system. One of the column will be for the sidebar, the other column will be for the main screen, right? So here we want the sidebar. Then here I can just say, just so that we have structure, I can just say end of sidebar, right? Then somewhere here we're also going to have the main screen section, right? Then we are going to have end of main screen section, so that we have a well-defined readable HTML page. So in this particular sidebar, we want, since the sidebar is still navigation, so we want to use the nav elements, right, to package all these guys. Okay, so to package here, so this is what I'm trying to say, to package here, right? So we are not doing responsive, and that's why this looks like this, right? So this is sidebar, and these are navigation items. So whenever you are dealing with navigation items, it is proper to actually package the items, right, into a nav element, and that's why I'm using nav elements here. So here I'm just going to say class of sidebar, right? And inside there, so you can see that we have this text, my CMS. So that is going to be heading 2, right? Heading 2, and we are just going to say my CMS. So you have a choice of putting whatever you want there. You can even replace that with an actual logo, right? Then here we have a list of navigation items. So whenever you want to render that list, these are not ordered lists. So these are another list of navigation items. So it is proper to use UL here, right? So you see, I'm trying to explain this so that you know why we are using what element, right? Because elements, again, are meant to be used correctly depending on what you want to display on the page. So in this particular one, every typical of UL, the UL want the list of items, which is LI, right, as a direct children. So inside the LI, we then have the navigation items. So don't forget, these are clickable links. So again, to represent links that should be clickable, we use anchor element, right? Then again, you can see that I'm getting auto completion because I have emit installed already. So if you have been following the series, you have come across when I installed emit library var here, right? I won't be going into that. Then here hash, which means we are not linking to anywhere for now. Then inside there, you can see that I have icon, right? I have this home icon and all that. So let's just make sure that we capture that also. So I will just do this and say icon, that is I for icon. Then in order to capture this icon, we just use class of FAS. So this is coming from the library now. If you're not used to using font awesome icons, you might not be used to this. But I think in the last section too, I spoke about how to use font awesome icons, right? In that particular section. So you might want to check it out. But these are just given class, right, by font awesome library that allows us to represent these icons. So they are not what we have in our main.css. This will be picked from the font awesome icon library that we connect to here, the CDNGS. Here, what we just want is FA home, right? I know that this is the class that represents the home icon. I just want that. Then outside here, I want the dashboard, right? So which is representing this. So we have two items here. So this is also a mini layout, right? That we are going to style eventually. You can see that this is sitting next to each other. And if you don't know about display, you might not understand why this is sitting next to each other by default, right? And of course, for other icons, they might not sit next to each other. So that's why we're talking about display property. We're talking about some layout and positioning of elements and all that. Because without that, you will just be seeing this. You will not understand why we have this. Already I know that there won't be much styling here. That's why I'm using two inline elements, so to say, so that automatically they can sit next to each other, right? That's that about that. Then we can now duplicate this to represent the other screens, right? So you can see that this is pretty straightforward. How many items do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So just like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take a pause here, right? And factor in all that so that this is not, I don't want you to watch me doing all this. It might take time, right? Okay, let's just do it. Let's just do it. FA cog, right? And this is going to be, the text is going to be settings. Again, you can visit the CDNGS library, right? To see all these icon names. Then here I want FA chart line. And that is going to be our analytics, right? Analytics. Then we also have this is going to be message. That's going to be FA envelope, right? And this is going to be message or messages. Then we also have FA users. So let's say this is customers. Then lastly, we have we have FA user. So which like a single user now. And this is going to be for user and row. So these are typical stuff that you normally have on admin dashboard, right? Then here we have the last one there, we have others. So that's going to be FA cards plus, right? And we are going to have here others table. All right, so that's what we have there. And if I come here, of course, no CSS, this is what you get. And I want to believe that you know why we have this. So let's move away from that and go to the let's go to the main content section, right? Main screen, I can also say main content. All right, so here let's just have a section. I'm going to give it a class of main content. Right, so inside there we are going to have the header, right? And the header here is just going to be dashboard overview. Dashboard overview, right? So you can see that it's showing already here. So I'm saving it. Then we want okay, so for the dashboard overview, I don't just want a regular text. I want heading 1, right? Dashboard overview. So you can see that the moment I use heading 1 is bigger. Again, I'm not using heading 1 so that it should be big. I'm using heading 1 because this is the most important thing. Yeah, it's all about dashboard overview, right? So that's why you use heading 1. The most important, it captures the most important thing on the page, not because you want the size to be big. Then here we want div then I want to give this a class of content wrapper, right? Content wrapper. That's for the main screen. Now, don't forget we have two screens again, right? Which is the main part, which is the sidebar, and this is the other one, right? And that's what we are dealing with now, this side of things. So inside that particular part, we want, don't forget we have cards, right? So we just want to represent the cards. So we want about we have about let's just say 4 cards, right? So let's say div for the first card. In fact, I might just say here card 1. So that's this first card here, right? We have 4 of them. Card 1. Then we just want to give it a class of, because adding class is very important, because that's how we'll style them, right? Content card. Then inside that div, we want an icon, right? As we see here, I have icon, then I have title, and I have other stuff. So the icon here is going to be FAS. So that's going to be class FAS FA-users, right? So underneath it, then we want heading 3. And you know why I'm using heading 3. It's not the most important, right, on the page. So heading 3, I just want to say users, right? Just like we have here, users. Then I want a paragraph text to actually capture the remaining text there. And there I just have 1204, right? Then active users. So usually these details will be coming from the backend, right? So then we want card 2 now. Let's say card 2. Card 2 is just going to look like this also. That's why I gave them that general class name, so that I will style just one and every other one will be styled too. So the class here, content card, remains the same. We'll change this to FA chart pie. So that represents this icon, right? Then here we want sales. Then here we want so we want the $sign. Then 10,000 10,423 in revenue. So that's that with card 2, right? Then we also want card 3, and it's just also going to be like this. So let's just make it fast. And here we want FA comments representing this. Then this is going to be messages. Then we are going to say 157 on red messages. All right. All right. So that's what we want there for that section. Then we can come down here and then also have, I think I want to do something here. Okay, yeah. So then we can come down to this other section, which is the other table, right? Let's just say other table section. All right, so here we want a div. You can also use section instead of div, right? You can just say section. And this is going to be class of other section, right? And inside here, we're going to have another div, right? So again, let me explain this. So this div now is actually meant to hold this particular icon here, this cat icon here, right? So at that point, I'm actually using position absolute with respect to the other section table. I know if you don't know about positioning, absolute positioning, right, with relative, it might not make sense to you, but let's just have a structure on ground, right? So here is going to have class of other dash icon, other icon representing this, right? There's a reason why I'm placing that class there, and I'll explain that. So then inside that particular div, I want an icon that actually represents that particular cart. So I'm going to say class of FAS, FA dash cart dash plus. So that's all we need there. And this div is going to represent, everything is going to represent this particular cart icon, right? So outside that, we can then have, another div, right, that represents the actual other cards, right? Other card, I mean. So just say other class of other dash card, right? So inside that particular other card, I have the other overview. That's the title, right? So I'm going to use heading 2 there, heading 2, and this is going to be others overview, right? So you see that when you are writing HTML, structure needs to be in your mind, layout needs to be in your mind. So you need to often refer to the design you are giving, whether the Figma design, right? Look at the layout properly and ensure that your HTML is well prepared to actually follow that layout pattern, right? Then outside that, we can now have the table elements, right? Then here we can have a class of, all these classes are going to be used in CSS, others table, right? So after that, we have the table head, right? So these are table elements, the table head. So inside table head, we have the table row, right? And inside the table row, we want the table cells. So the table cells are just going to represent the table title, right? Other ID. So you see that for this table now, I have the title, this yellow label title, then I have the content. So other ID, we want to capture other ID, we want to capture dates, we want to capture the date field, we want to capture products, right? We want to capture products, we want to capture total. So I think that's just all. 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's capture quantity too. Quantity. All right, so that represents our table head. So if I come here, we should see that. So you can see these are table titles: order ID, date, product, quantity, and total. So you see that currently what we have is far away from the design, right? But the HTML is already prepared for styling, right? So usually when you write HTML, there's still much work to be done in order to make it look like you want it to be. And that's why we are learning CSS, right? Because without CSS, that would be impossible. So away from the head section, then let's check the body, T body. So for the T body, we also want the table row, right? Because each row in the table is going to be a table row, right? So this will be the first row. And the items we want, they are just items that will fill in for this other ID, date, and other. So for the first TD, table cell now. So this is table head, this one is table cell. So here we want #001. So this usually will be something that uniquely identifies the item from the backend, maybe the other ID, right? But here we are just having some coded values. Then we have about 5 columns to fill. So let's just represent them and change the content. So for this particular part, we want, let's say 2024, right? So this is the date now, a date string, 15. Then we also want the title, right? So let's say this is wireless headphones, right? Then we also want the quantity, that will be 2. Then the price, $120. So price per one, right? And we have that, so you can see that here already. So I will not want you to watch me doing the rest. Okay, let's just do it also. I think it's pretty straightforward. Let's just have 3 more rows, or let's say 5, and let's just update the content quickly. So away from the headphone, let's also represent, let's have found that one, let's say smartwatch, right? Let's say here we have smart watch. Then we can just say 150, and I can just say here is 2. Then here we can say ID of 3. Let's change the date here to 6, right? Then let this one be Bluetooth speaker. I just say Bluetooth speaker, right? So let's leave the content like that. Then the other one, let's have gaming laptop. Gaming laptop. Let's say the quantity here is 3. Let's say the price here is 3, and this should be ID 4 now. This one should be ID 3. So I might just leave this as 17, right? Then the last one, let's just have, okay, I just have something here that says just say earpod, and let's say here is 05, right? 18. Let's say this one is $10. So I think that represents what we want, and this is all we need to capture. But you could see that I had to structure things properly, use the right HTML elements, right, and prepare things for styling. So if you work this way, actually CSS and HTML and design is very, very simple. If you have understanding of what is going on, it's very simple and can be fun also. So that's it with the layout. Now we can start styling what we have, right? So that it looks like this. But again, before styling, right, I want to talk about CSS layouts, the concepts that you need to know, right, to be able to understand what we've done and move forward. Let's quickly do that. I will use this slide, right, as a guide. I will start with display, right? You need to understand what CSS display property is, because that is what lays the foundation for working for building layouts, right? So you need to understand different displays that the elements can have. So let's start from there. Display property. So display property controls how an element is rendered in the layout flow, right? There are several values for display. The most common ones are what we'll be talking about. We have the display of block. In fact, every element that you have, every HTML element, have a display property by default. So usually it's either they are display block or inline by default. And if you went through my HTML series, you remember that I did mention that anchor elements are inline elements by default. Span elements are inline elements by default. Inline elements are elements that can sit next to one another. They just take the space that is just okay for their content, right? So then for block elements, for instance, div is a block element, section is a block element. We have other examples of block elements. Understanding this is very, very important, because if not, you will not be, CSS is not gambling, right? It's not try and error. You are following laid down rules to actually implement a design. So we have block, we have inline block, and we have none. We have flex and we have grid. In this section, I will not be talking about flex and grid, because flex and grid are meant to be handled per section, right? We can spend the whole section talking about flex. We can spend the whole section talking about grid, and that's how we are going to do it in these upcoming sections, right? So it will be too much to put in flex and grid in this same section. So I'll just talk about the basic things that can still allow you to build layout without flex and grid. Then in the coming sections, we'll see how we can do the same thing with flex and grid. So on the display types, elements with display or block, right, take off full width available. So stacking one on top of another. What that means is that whenever you use display of block property on a particular element, right, that element will take the full width, right? It takes the full width of the available space, meaning that no other element can sit next to it. So that will mean that any element that is coming next is forced to go down, right, in its order. That's it. And how you do that is just a display of block. So if an element default is display of block, you don't need to specify it. That will be the default already, right? So as I'm explaining, I will also try to do that from here, just demonstrate quickly. So for instance, now, I know I have some div elements here, right? I have this div, right? So if I come here and just say target the div, or let's say target every div on the page using the div element, right? Or the div tag name. Then if I say display of block here, It's not necessary, because if you understand CSS, div already have a default display or block. You don't need to. So the only reason why I will specify this is if I want this to be flex, if I want this to be inline block, or any other display property that is different from block, because the default for div is block, right? So that's what I'm trying to say. But if I have an anchor element and I want this anchor element to have width and height, and I know that anchor by default is inline and does not have width and height property, right? You won't be able to use width and height on it, right? If I want to use width and height on this anchor element, I will use inline block. Automatically, that gives me the ability to use width and height property on an anchor element, which is actually inline by default, right? So you can change the default display property of elements. So from what you see here, you can see that I have display of block. That's how you do it, and you can assign different values to it. So we also have inline display, right? Display inline. This take up as much space as necessary, like I've explained. The examples of displaying inline elements are span, anchor, strong, and all that, right? So they do not start on new line, allowing other elements to sit next to them. And this is how you use display inline, right? You just need to know what it does. There's nothing special about that. Then we also have inline block, right? Similar to inline, but this one has the ability to set width and height. So if you are working with just inline elements with default inline display, you will not be able to use width and height on them. Those properties are available to elements that are inline block or block, right? So if you have inline elements and you want them to have width and height property, you want to be able to set width and height property, you need to change to inline block, right? So this is why I said you need to understand how to use these display properties. Then we also have none. Elements with display none are completely removed from. So if I want to hide an element, I will set the display property to none, which means it will be taken totally away from the screen. Usually this behavior is used to hide elements on the page. There are times that you have an hamburger menu here, and once you click it, it will show an element. Once you click it, it will take away the element. So part of usually the workaround that is to set the display to none. And on the click of the button, you use JavaScript to set this property back to block, which will now show the element, right? I'm not demonstrating this because it will just make the video longer. And since I'm still going to demonstrate most of these things when I'm trying to build the CSS for this, right? We'll demonstrate that. Then coming to position, right? So for the ones that I think should be demonstrated, I will do that. So for position, CSS provides 5 different positioning schemes for controlling placement of elements. So we have just talked about display property, right? Then we also have positioning property. So we have the liberty to hang element anywhere. I can put an element here, right? Just like you have this here. You can see that as I'm scrolling here, this thing remains fixed. It's positioned there and it's not changing. I'm using a type of position that makes it look that way. Then this is another positioned element and it's here, right? And it's just only relative to this particular other table. So you can hang elements anywhere on the page if you understand positioning, which is part of layout, building layout, right? So we have static, relative, absolute, fixed, and sticky. Usually you need to understand this, right? You need to, even when it comes to building a mini cart, something cart, there's a way you can build carts like this one now. We have another icon here and we have 1 on it, maybe the total number of items in cart. If you want to implement that with CSS, you need understanding of position, absolute, position, relative, right, and all that. So now what are the position types? Let's start with the static. The static is the default, just like I mentioned when we were talking about the display properties, right? Every element have default display property, either inline or block. Also for positioning, every element have a default position, and which is for every element, it is static. So the static position, elements are positioned in a normal document flow, that is from the top to the bottom, like that, as they appear naturally. For instance, now you will notice that here, in the flow that I have here, because these elements have a default position of static, right? They all maintain that flow. If you see, okay, let me go ahead. If you see this, right, you can see where I have CMS that is coming first in the flow, right? Then we also have the dashboard, not here, here now, because when we style, we change that flow. But without styling, you can see that CMS is the first here, and it's also here. Then the navigation links are also the next in the flow. This order is followed because all the elements have the static, the position of static by default. And you can see this also. Then the last item we have here is what has to do with the other overview, and that's what we have here. So that's what I mean by position static, right? Every element have a default static position, which is what I've just explained, the normal document flow. Then we also have relative, right? Elements are positioned relative to their normal position. You just move them around, right? You can move them around with certain properties. For instance, now if I set position to relative, top 20 left. So what this means is that this element will now can be moved around relative to a normal position, right? For instance, now let me play with this other overview first. The other overview is having a class. Let's just play with it first before we start implementing that. Let's say this other section, right? This other section. I might capture it here in the CSS and just say dots is a class, other section. I might just say position, relative, right? And if I save it, nothing changed. That's because when you use relative, it's positioned relative to its normal position. And this is normal position in the flow, so nothing changed. But where things can change is if I now say top, if I say top of 50 pixel, and this does not take the element out of its normal flow, right? 50 pixel. Just notice there will be a gap here. So can you see now that this section is now positioned 50 pixel away from the top, away from its normal relative position, right? If you want to do right too, we can still do that. Just although that right will not be visible, I just say 10 pixel. So you can see that allows us to, that causes a shift away from what we have. So, but this is just to explain what relative positioning means and all that. So let's just move away from that. I'll just use this to explain the other stuff. Then we also have position absolute, right? So elements are removed from the document flow. Just take note of that. Here too, we said this one, when you use relative, the element is not removed from document flow. And I showed you that when I did that, there was no shift away from document. But for position absolute, the moment you use absolute, the element is removed from the normal document flow, right? So take note of that. Other elements in the flow will follow the normal flow, but this one will be moved out of the normal flow, right? So take note of that. It's like you are removing the elements away from the normal flow. Others will follow, but that will fill in the space, while this one can now be shifted to other places. So if this is not relative, if this is not having any immediate relative position set, is going to be picking its relative. It's going to be using the browser window as its relative position. Again, elements are removed from the document flow and positioned relative to their closest position. So if you don't set any closest position, it's going to use the browser window, right? For instance, what I mean is this. Again, let's use this and let's say position here. Instead of absolute, instead of relative, let's use absolute. The moment I save, just take note of this. This guy will be taken away from normal flow, and I expect it to be here. It will be here. It will move here because absolute will take it away from normal flow. Once I save, here, and then I can apply. Once I say top property, let's say I'm saying top property of 0. So can you see now? It's moved. All that's continuing in the normal flow, but this is moved away from normal flow. And it does not affect anything, but it's beautiful because it allows us to now, we can remove an element from normal flow and put it anywhere. So you can see that other table is now here. If the design says it should be here, it can be here, but it has been moved away from the normal flow, which is here and is now here. I can even say right? I might say right of, let's say right of 10, and it will start from here to come to this edge, right? We come to this other side. So that's just what I want to talk about when it comes to relative. And now this is coming here. Maybe I'll also use this to explain on that scenario. So this is using the browser window as a default, right? Relative as a relative reference. And that is because we did not set any reference for this other table. So, but let's say, for instance, let's say here, let's say this, let's say I want to tweak things, right? I want to actually use this other card. I want to use this other card, right? Here. Let's say I'm using other card and I still want position absolute, right? You can see that is moved. But one thing I can do is this other section, right, is a parent of other card. And let's say I want to move this other card relative to the parent. I will need to now come here, right? These are some of the concepts that do confuse people when you're just starting out. Here, I would not say position relative. So what means is that this other card, which is having absolute, will now take its reference from this and not the browser window. So if I save now, this will come down. Can you see that? So that is because this other card is not referencing the parent, which is other section, and not the browser window. So I think that is the thing I can explain here, right? Again, this is removed out of normal document flow, right? So we also have fixed. So similar to absolute, this fixed is similar to absolute, but element is positioned relative to the browser window. So this one, there's nothing like it's referencing relative to the immediate parent element, like we just explained in absolute, in the case of absolute, right? For fixed, it references the browser window directly, right? Once you use fixed, and usually this is what you use for navigation, fixed navigation bar. There are times that your navigation bar is fixed if you visit website very well, right? So that is what is actually used, and the element is also removed out of the normal flow. For instance, now let's just remove this. So I might say this section should be fixed. So when you use fixed, what happens is that when you scroll, right? If I come back here, so this is fixed now. I'm not using any top value. So if I use top of 0, it will reference the browser window. So you can see now. So if this was to be scrollable, you will see that this other table will remain fixed there. It will never scroll, right? So I don't want to. Okay, let me even demo that. I think we can demo that quickly here. So let's just say I'm coming down and I have a paragraph section. I'll just say lorem 10,000. Lorem 10,000, right? I know that will cause an overflow. Okay, so you can see that there's an overflow here, right? So if I decide to start scrolling, can you see that this other overview sticks to the top? That's because we are using it fixed, right? It stays there. It stays there. That's what we mean by positioning. It stays there, right? So let's go away from that. That was just to demonstrate what I just explained. All right, so you might want to re-watch the video again if this is too fast for you. But one thing is you need to understand this, right? Don't jump it. Then we also have sticky. So a hybrid between relative and fixed, right? Hybrid between relative and fixed. The element is treated as relative until it reaches a specific position in viewport, then becomes fixed. So that's when you use position sticky. Usually you set a top, right? And the moment you start scrolling, it will be moving. Then once you get to a point, it will stick. I think I can still use this to explain it also, right? So let me just return back. Let me return back. Okay, not here. Okay, let's just have it again. Paragraph, lorem 10,000. So these are just things that if you want to learn, right? We can't be skipping this. If you skip this, you will struggle. So here, this is position absolute now. You can see that it's still at the top, right? It's position fixed and it's at the top, but I want to change it to okay, for this to also make sense, let me put background so that we'll see very well. Background color of let's just put something like this, right? Yeah. So let's have position again, this position fixed, and you can see that it's fixed there, right? So maybe that will be clearer. Then let's have position absolute, right? Position sticky, right? Which is an hybrid of between relative and fixed, right? So what happens there is the moment I start scrolling, right, you can see that it's scrolling. This is the normal position there and it's here. But the moment this particular element gets to top of 0, it will stay fixed. So it's relative now. For now, the moment I get to the top, can you see now? It's fixed and I can start going. Then it's relative again, it moves. And when it gets there, it's fixed. So that's usually the behavior you have with navigation items, so that when you scroll down, the column navigation is still visible to you, it hangs there. Then when you're on top, it's movable, right? So that's what I want to explain based on that. And if you understand that these are basic examples that will actually allow you to understand what we are doing. So away from that, then let's talk about float and clear. So I will not waste time here. So the float property allows elements to float to the left and to the right. Actually, this is what we'll be using here. Since we are not talking about float and grid, right? That is what I'll be using here to actually set up the 2-column system that I have here, right? I'm going to float this particular sidebar to the left, and this one will be to the right? That's how we do that. So usually float is not commonly used again since the advent of flex box and grid, right? But before flex box and grid, float is what we normally use. So then whenever you use floats, there is a way the elements around the element that has a float property behaves. So in order to control the behavior of elements around the floated proper elements, right, we use what we call clear, and we supply values to it. So why clear is used to manage how elements should behave around a floated element, right? Whenever you float an element, you need to control how elements are meant to behave around them. That's what the clear property is used for. So for instance, now floating elements allow text and inline elements to wrap around them. So, okay, like I said, I will demonstrate this so that I won't waste time. I'll demonstrate this by the time implemented the CSS on the design we have, right? Then we have clear property ensures that elements are positioned below floated elements. Then another important concept here is z-index and stacking context, right? Very, very important, z-index and stacking context, because as you are building your layout, there are times that elements will overlap, right? And you need to control the overlap order, right? The one that should be on top, the one that should be below, and all that. So that's where you start talking about z-index and stacking context. So there's what we call the root stacking context. Every element belongs to that context. But when you apply some position property like fixed, absolute, and all that to a particular element, and maybe parent element, and we have children elements, right? That will create a new stacking context different from the default root context that we have for all the elements. And the z-index can actually be used to order the stacking of this particular elements on top one another. I'm going to show you the visual to this so that what I'm saying can be better visualized. So the index property controls the vertical stacking order of elements that overlap. Higher z-index values are placed in front of lower values. Just take note of that. So when the z-index is high, right, it means that that element will be on top of the ones that are lower. So this is what I'm trying to explain. You can see we have two items here. We have the one with example 1, example 2. So this one is the blue, this one is the red. It happens that in the building of layout, these two overlap, right? So, and in our case, we want the Z box, the red box, to be on top, right, of the blue box, right? So depending on what you are doing. So what makes that work is that we have z-index of 2, right? This one we have z-index of 1. And we are using z-index here because you can see position here. Position absolute already takes this element out of normal position, right? And we just need to ensure that the overlap of these elements are well arranged so that we'll not have behavior we don't want when we are building a layout. So z-index of 2 is higher than z-index of 1, which means this example 2, right, will be on top of this one when they overlap. So that's just what that's all about. Then the stacking context. This is just trying to explain the content, the basis behind stacking context. The stacking context is a 3-dimensional concept in CSS. So when elements overlap, this will always happen, right? Depending on the designer of the page. CSS determines the order in which they appear, and this is governed by the stacking context. So each positioned element, whether relative, absolute, or fixed, right, generates its own stacking context, and elements within that context can be stacked with the z-index. So you can see that element within this context, the last one, this one, right, are stacked with the z-index property of 1 and 2, right? So if you are dealing with normal positioned element, maybe static of position of static, that will not be the case because that will be governed by the root stack context, right? And that's what brings me to the last part here, which is key points of stacking context. Position elements create a stacking context. When an element is positioned relative, absolute, or fixed, and it has a z-index other than auto, it creates its own stacking context, right? So child elements within that stacking context are then stacked in relation to each other, but their stacking context is isolated from other elements outside it, right? Again, I'll refer to here, these elements overlap, right? And we needed to have a stacking context. They have thus creating their own stacking context, and we needed to use the z-index property to create the order in which these elements should be stacked. If this were to be true, blue will be on top, right, of this one, right? The higher the z-index, the higher the order in which they are placed in the stacking context. So I think that is basically all I need to cover here. Then this is talking about the root context, like I've said. So it's the HTML default stacking context. Every element on the page is part of this context unless it creates its own stacking context. And that happens when you display property of either relative, absolute, and fixed. So I think that is just that's how far I can go now in terms of trying to explain the stacking context. So based on what we've learned now, let's apply that to what we have on ground, right? So that we can have this styled as we want it to be, So we are going to be using this, right, as our reference. So let's start with the dashboard, right? I have a class here called Okay, I also need to remove this paragraph element. So I have a class here called dashboard, right? So this is going to be dot dashboard here, dot dashboard, right? So for that, we are going to set the width to 100%. So that it's the entire screen. We want it to be the entire screen. Then we want the display property to be inline block as against block. Don't forget I spoke about inline block, right? It just ensures that other elements can sit next to the current page that you have. And we want that behavior because okay, even if we don't have that behavior, it's not as important because the sidebar is also a child of the dashboard element, right? So let's just have that. But even if you use display block, I don't think it will impact. Then we have the sidebar style. So let's start the sidebar. Here we want dot sidebar. So I have a class like that. Again, if you remember, here is it. Then inside there we want okay, let me just be showing this so that I'll be seeing it, right? We want width to be set to 250 pixel, right? We want the width to be set to 50 pixel. Then we want the height to be set to 100 VH, right? That's just setting it to the height of the viewport, the device viewport. So this is actually responsive on mobile to just take the height of the viewport of the mobile. If you're on desktop, the same thing, right? We want background color set to ash 252525. Ash 252525, right? So you can see that this is showing up now. So, right. Then we want, and you can see that this is just the view width. It's not, that's why I used VH there. The height is just the height of the screen, the height of the viewport. Then we want the display here to be block. Although the display property is blocked by default, right? Because it's a div. That's why I said, even if you don't show it, it doesn't impact because that's the default, right? But just for explanation's sake, I'll put it there. Then padding of 20 pixels. So I already explained what padding is. I won't be going into that in the previous sections. So you can see that we now have space in here, right? Then we want, so what we now want is that this should be floated to the left so that it can be the sidebar, right? Floated left. And you can see the moment I use left, the other content, right, which is the dashboard overview, the other section moved to the right, right? So that is how we set up this 2-column layout, right, with the use of floats. We could have used flex or grid, but we've not learned that. I just want to stick to what we are learning here, right? Is there another thing I'm supposed to set? So here we can just have position of relative, right? So that I'm using position relative here, so that if I need to use position absolute for anything inside this here, it will be taking this as its reference and not the browser window, right? So that's why I needed to take you through those concepts before we start doing all this. Then let's type this sidebar, this heading 2 inside the sidebar. So again, if I want to target not just all heading 2, but the one specifically inside the sidebar, I'll say sidebar heading 2. This is what we call descendant selector, right? If you remember. So if that is strange to you, you can check the previous sections that we have. Here we want size of 1.5 rem. So rem init is one of the values that you can set for sizes, right? So, and this is very responsive. We'll still look into this detail in the coming sections, right? Then we want color. Color here should be ash, that yellow color, ash F39C12, right? So you can see that picks it up. Then we want the margin to the bottom to be 40 pixel. Margin to the bottom to be 40 pixel. So, and you can see that we now have a space between here and what we have here, right? Then we want, now away from that, we want to style this UL, right? Again, everything is inside the list elements, right? You can see the UL element. I can target this, and I can target other items inside. If you don't know how to select, right? If you don't know how to use all the selectors, we've handled the series on CSS selectors, and we built a project based on that. So that should help you. I will also leave links in the description. So here we can just say dot sidebar. So another descendant selector UL. So that's targeting that UL list. Then we want to remove the list style. List style we want to set to none. So that will remove all these default styles that we have. You can see that is gone, right? Then we want the, okay, away from that, I think that's just all I want there. Then the sidebar again. I want the UL, the list, right? So I want list element that is a descendant of the UL and UL that is a descendant of the sidebar, right? So we want the margin bottom to be 20 pixels, just so that we have space to the bottom of each of these. So you can see that behavior, right? Then let's move away from that also. So we want the sidebar, right? UL, LI, anchor element. So that's descendant selector to anchor element that is a descendant of list element that is descendant of UL, right? And that's the structure we have, right? Again, you can see that we have the list, the anchor element is inside the list is inside UL and all that. So here we want color of, right? We want the color to be hash FFF. So you can see that the color has changed, right? Then we want the text decoration, all those underline. That's what is responsible for that. We want it to be none. Currently is underline here, but we want to be none. The default is underline, and that's why it picks up that. So that is removed, right? We also want the display property to be inline block. Display property to be inline block. So this will allow, don't forget these are list element, but if you use inline block, we can use width and height on it, right? So then we want font size of 1.2 rem. All right, so this is bigger now. So if you check, there should be space between this icon and the text. So we'll set that also as we move on. All right. So let's also have the sidebar icons. This one, and let's apply that to it. So I can just say dot sidebar. I'm using the sidebar so that we are targeting only elements that is inside the sidebar, right? The sidebar UL, LI, anchor, icon. So we have icons inside this one. Inside here, we have this icon. That's what I'm trying to target. So here we are just saying that margin to the right of 10 pixels, just so that we have breathing space. Can you see now, right? Then we also want the color to be set to hash, this one, right? So you can see that now. So you can see that if you know the rules, right? Styling, and it's not difficult if you know the rules. And usually these days, you even have libraries that you can quickly use to implement what you want to do. So that's it with a sidebar. Usually you can do other stuff, but that's okay for now. Now let's start working on the other side of things. So I want to make this bigger, right? Okay, so let's just work with this part. So now after here, we want to start styling the main content. The main content. So here we have dot main. These are classes that I've added before. Content, right? Then here we want margin to the left. So you can see that this main content is just sitting next to the sidebar. We want breathing space between them. So just imagine to the left of 270 pixel. So don't forget that the margin for the width of this particular guy, right? The width of this sidebar is 250. If you remember, right, is 250. Yeah, 250 pixel. So we want since the main content is going to be taking the full screen, we don't want this thing hiding under it. So we just want this to be 270 pixels. You just ensure that the dashboard overview is starting, right, a little bit away from the sidebar, which is 250 pixels. So once we do that, so can you see that behavior? Right? Can you see that behavior now? So let's continue. Then we want padding. One padding of 20 pixel, not 200, 20 pixel. Padding of 20 pixel, right? Padding again to the right, to the top, to the left, to the bottom. That's the short way of defining that. Then we want height to also be 100 view height, and this is because this is we are dealing with a dashboard, right? So usually you want things to stay within the viewport. You can see that things are shaping out now in terms of layout. Then let's also have header header 1, right? And just like this, we can have font size of 2 rem, right, for the heading 1. So you can see that this is bigger now, right? Then we can have margin to the bottom just so that it comes down a bit, of 20 pixel, right? So it comes down a bit. Then we also want color of that yellow color, this. So you can see now that that is looking good, right? Then let's come down to the next thing, the content wrapper. Dot content content dash wrapper. So again, those are classes that I've added when we are writing the CSS. So the content wrapper, we want the width to be the width of the 100% of the dashboard side. So you can see now that things are perfectly looking good, right? Then we want the dot content card, right? Those are the cards that we have, dot content card, right? Again, okay, let me just click on here. If you check here, these things are here, right? You can see content card. That's what I'm trying to start. So dot content card, I don't want any. So we want to set this display. We want to set display of inline block for that section, right? We want to set the width to be 30% so that it's responsive. So you can see now that since that is the advantage of classes, right? This same class is what we apply on the 3 different cards. And you can see that as I'm styling one, others are already taking shape. And they have width of 30%, right? Which just makes them to, the total width here is going to be 90. So which means if we have 10 to the right, 10 to the left, right? Overall, we have 100. That's why I set 100 here. I set this to 100, right? The content wrapper to 100. Then this one, 30% ish, that will be 90, right? Then we have the remaining 10 to the right and to the left. So that's what it takes to build layouts. So there are times to that you do calculations. So you can see margin to the right here, margin to the right. So we just imagine to the right of 5%, right? Don't forget that we have 100% to work with. So that ensures that this comes down. That's why I have that. If you want it to stay on a single line, you won't have to do that. Then we want margin bottom of 20 pixel, just so that they have space to the bottom. So you can see that, right? Then we also want, if you are building along, and which is what I will advise, make sure that you're also looking at this and looking at it. There's a way it makes you master these things, right? Background color of ash 333, right? So you can see now that the background color here is exactly what we have here. So that we know that these are cards, right? And that's why I'm trying to give it a different color from the overview, the dashboard color itself. Then we have padding, right? So that we have breathing space between the radius and the content, between the border of the items, right, and the content. So if you don't understand box model, check the very last section we had. We dealt with box model in that series. So border radius. So we want curved edges. So I will use 8 pixel so that the edges are actually curved. So you can see that we have the cards now with curved edges. So that's that. Then let's align the text to the center. Text align to the center. So it is as you practice that these things becomes easier, right? You can't just watch me do it. You've not mastered me. If you've not mastered it, if all you are doing is watching me do it, you should take time to practice it out, right? Watch the video over and over again until you master the basics. Dot content card. The last item in the content we want to exempt. Again, these are things we've talked about in this section, right? Using pseudo classes, right? Not pseudo elements, now pseudo class. This is pseudo class, right? We are targeting the card content. We have 3 of them. We are saying the last one, right, which is this one, should not have margin to the right, and it's reasonable. It makes sense to avoid that 0, right? Great. So the icons now, dot card content icon. So this is fun. I don't know, but if you understand what is going on, it's fun. I'm enjoying it as I'm doing it, right? And you too should. And that's why the basics is very important. The concepts are important. You don't jump that. Font size of 2 rem. Font size of 2 rem, right? The margin to the bottom of 10 pixel. So you can see that the icons are bigger now, right? The icons are bigger. Then let's talk about the content, the card paragraph. So the cards paragraph, right? We want font size of 1.2 rem. So if you are following me, I believe that you will see those things there, right? These are the card. Every card has icon, heading 3, and paragraph. That's what I just typed, right? So that's it with that section. Let's now go to the other table section, right? Let's go to the other table section. You can see that because we are using this explains what I was talking about, the use of what's it called now? The use of floats. And you can see the behavior of this other item now. And you can see the behavior of this one, right? So very, very important. So let's just move on. This other overview will still need to come here, right? Because we don't want it to stay under here. So here, let's say other table. So we are getting towards the end of this. This might be long, right? But it's important that I do it this way so that it's not just based on random tutorials. I just say do this way without giving you the background knowledge of what you are supposed to know, right? So in anything we are learning, there's a price to pay, right? The price of time. I know at times people don't like things to be long, right? But there are just times that you need to take that time to master those things once and for all and move forward, right? Position, relative. That's the other table section. And there's a reason why I'm doing that again. We've talked about what relative means, right? When I was explaining the basics. We want the width to also be, the width of that table section to be 100%, right? Again, if you need to check that out, that is here. So you can see here we have the other section, which is the wrapper that wraps the entire table section. And we have some things there. So I told you that I used position here, position of absolute to position this relative to this section, right? So I will show you that. Then I want the sections to have some margin to the top bottom so that we have space between here and what is coming. So I'll just say margin to the top of 20 pixel, right? We are not seeing it yet because we need to add some styles, right? So that it can come in here and not stay there. So here we want, let me just move down there as we are styling. So this is what we are doing. So let's style the other icon first, this one, and position it somewhere here where it's supposed to be. So just say dot other, I think I used other icon on the CSS. So dot other icon. Don't forget that this other icon is inside this other section, and this other section is already position relative. So any use of absolute here will reference here, will reference this section and not the browser window. And that's what I want here, right? I want this icon to be position relative to this section and not the browser window. So here we can say position. What we want now is absolute, right? Position absolute. Then so you can see the icon here, right? So we need to use the top property. So top of 2 pixel. Then we also want right. So we want it to be at the right side. Right of so let's say right of 40%. So usually I had to more like try and error, right, to ensure that it stays where I want it to be. So you can see that it's here already, right? It's here already. So this is 40% away from the right, which is responsive. So this is the use of position absolute with position relative combined. The section is position relative. This icon is position absolute. And when you use absolute, it references the immediate parent, right? That is relative to it and not the parent, or the document window. So that's it with that part. Then let's check the, okay, here I want the font size to be font size of 50 pixel. All right, just to make it big. Good. So then let's have dot other card. Let's tie the other card itself. So we want the width to be 60 pixel. We don't want it to be too big, or 60% now. We want the table, we don't want the table to be too big, right? 60%. Then margin to the right. Margin to the right, I just say of 2%. Right? Margin bottom of 20 pixel. Let me just float it. So float to the left. All right. Then we want the border radius. So let me come here. Since I didn't, let me give it the background color so that we'll be able to also see. Background color of ash 333. All right, so you can see it now, right? Then we want the border, okay, padding first before border, padding of 20 pixels so that we have, you can see that everything here is just to the edge. We want space there, right? So padding of 20 pixels should give us that space, right? So there's no space here because it's position absolute and it's fine. Then we want color. The color should be ash FFF, although it's already picking that from the parents, right? So there's also what we call inheritance, right? So um, this text color is already inherited from, that's why it's white by default without even setting it. It's inherited from the parent body element, which is what we set here already. All right. So you see that there's no gap into this. There are just some things you must understand. Text align left, right? That's regarding the table now. We want things aligned to the left. All right. So so there's something else I also want to target. Other card, last child, again, pseudo element selector. The last child there, we want margin to the right of 0. So we don't want margin to the right on that. So what else do I need to target? Then the other table itself, dot other table. Here I'm going to use group selector. Dot other table. Okay, before other table, let's just say other table. Here we want the width of the table to be 100%. And don't forget, even though we are using 100%, right, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be 100% of the entire page. It's 100% of its container, which is which is what we have here, right? The other card. So because the table is inside the card, this one is going to be 100%. Then we want, apart from the width, we want the border collapse property set. Border collapse. We want that set to collapse. So that's set to collapse. Then we also want the margin to the top set to 20 pixels. All right. So then other things we want to target now are the content. So you can see that this is not well styled the way we want it to be. So let's target that. Here I'm going to use group selector, other table th, right? And I'm going to say comma. So this is more like I want to apply the same style to different things, right? I'm applying the table head and also the table cells, right? I'm just targeting everything. Then how you do that also is other table again, space td, right? So these are two different descendant selectors separated by comma, right? So that means whatever rule is set is going to apply to both of them. So here we're going to have border of, I'm going to use a shortcut, border of 1 pixel, solid, right? And the color here is going to be ash 555. So this is just short syntax. If you want to do it, right, you can define it separately. Border width of 1 pixel, border style of solid, border color of that, but this is better. So, and you can see what we have here. So let's also have padding, right? Padding of 10 pixel, padding of 10 pixel, 15 pixel. So this is 10 pixel to the top and bottom, 15 pixel left and right. All right. Other table TD. Okay. Let me do something there just to be sure that it's not what I'm thinking. Okay, this is what I'm thinking. Let me check my CSS. So I have a class of, okay, I said orders table instead of order table. That's why it wasn't picking it. So you can see now that those styles are there now. I was just wondering that those things are not coming up, right? Because of this the CSS. So I don't need this, right? I just wanted to have that. Okay. So what else do I have to capture here? So even though this is already inherited, let's just say test align left. This is not inherited, but the one I said inherited is color. So color is white by default from the body, but let's just set it. Then let's also have the other things now. So these are the properties we want to apply to both of them. So, and this is a way to keep things dry, a way to not repeat yourself. Because one thing is that you could have done it this way, separate them and repeat this block of code. But that is not efficient, and that's not the way to go. When you can do the same thing, when you can do the same thing with the same code, just group them together, right? But at the same time, I still want this. I still want some properties that should be unique to the table head, right? And that should not be applied to both of them. And that's why I'm separating this here. So I want the background color here, right, to be ash 444. So, and if you check here, so you can see that the background of the edge section is different from the background of here. So if I were to place this here, since this style, whatever is there is applying to both of them, that would not have been desired. That's why I still have to, even though I apply the same styles to this here, grouping these particular selectors, right, then I can still apply individual styles by uniquely selecting those elements. Then I want the color to be this color, right? And you can see that already, right? So I think we should be rounding up now. This has been a very long one. Then let's have dot orders table or order table, right? TR, right? End child. So these are also pseudo class selectors, right? That we've looked at already. So I want to target the odd values, right? And I want to say for all odd, I want the background color to be hash 333, right? Then the same thing for all even. So you see that these are things that you could not have been cramming, and if somebody asks you to follow it without knowing what is going on, next time you won't know why you should use it, right? So we've done CSS selectors again. I'm mentioning it. You can check out that series, right? And I will drop the link also in the description. So if you check this now, you should see that we now have all items in the even position with this color, all items in the odd position in this color with this color as explained here, right? I think the last thing I want to do here is I have something here that I didn't implement. So I'm not sure whether we can let go of that, right, because of time. But in the design, I have something here that's what you see. So I think we can just view this now. So you can see what we have now. So this should not be here. So I will look at that. So I want something. Okay, maybe I placed that outside the dashboard here. So I want something. I have something here, right, back to top, right, and it's actually position fixed. But we can let's go of that because I've actually explained during the course of the concept explanation how position fixed work and position absolute work. So we can just let go of this for the sake of time. But let's move this into view, right? I think it has to do with the way the CSS is arranged. So I have this here, content wrapper. So I think this should go inside. So do you have any? Okay, I think this should go inside here. Okay. Let me check what we have now. All right. So I think it was because of the way I placed the CSS, right? So you can see that we are finished with this now. So this is well laid, right? This is all about layout, and you can see that there's a lot to lay out. And if you don't understand the basics, what you need to know, you will struggle, right? Again, watch the tutorial, master the basics, implement this simple one, and you'll be able to take that knowledge to subsequent projects that you will be handling. So that's it. I will stop here. And in the next section, we'll be looking at some other interesting CSS concepts. See you in the next section. Don't forget to subscribe, right, to this channel, and also it helps the channel to grow. Don't forget to also click on the like button, right, and also turn on your notification bell. See you in the next section.